So if we look at the big headlines this week, from the economy to revenue targets, insecurity, and policing, Peter Obi has been very responsive to all of them. Whether it's putting out statements or posting on X, Obi is always pretty quick to make his stance known about any given issue that's going on. But for someone who has been a mainstay in the media since running for president in 2023, he's also been subject to a number of critiques. Recently, there were allegations that Obi, also the two-term governor of Anambra State, was being targeted for trolling on social media. But how true is this really? So, joining us now is Dapo Adaramewa. He's a member of the Obedient Movement, which is a leading political support group for Mr. Obi. It's really good to have you here. And, you know, social media trolling is essentially the posting of deliberate, offensive content online to kind of get reactions out of people, stir up some sort of, controversy. I would suspect that a lot of public figures should expect this kind of response, just because whether you're a celebrity, whether you're a politician or a leader, people will admire you, but you'll also naturally get some critique. So how are you thinking about this as someone, as part of this movement? How does Peter Obi kind of experience trolling, if at all?
Well, thank you very much. Now, it is to be expected. People, and we do live in a free country in the sense that we have the freedom of speech and you can express yourself. And just because in the course of expressing yourself, you also must entertain the idea that you might offend somebody. That's part of a democratic process. Now, Mr. Obi himself has been a victim of trolling consistently. I think it only becomes a problem when people start to make false claims and false narratives, at which point it becomes defamation, which is protected by law. So if it's just normal critics of they don't agree with his opinions, that's perfectly fine. But when people start to make false accusations, it is very important to, obviously clear your name. I'm sure none of us here would like somebody to constantly go online and make claims about things that happened when we all know they didn't happen. So like any other person, he has a right to, even sue people to court if they are found wanting for defamation.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just also curious as to what does that look like? Is it, replies on Twitter? Is it Facebook? Like, where are you seeing the majority of this trolling as regards to Peter Obi?
You see, Peter Obi himself is the most popular presidential candidate, arguably the most popular, the most relevant candidate in Nigeria today. And he doesn't shy away from the public. You see, usually politicians in Nigeria there's this air of superiority, right? And that's why people love him. He's constantly on Twitter Spaces. He's constantly going out there, meeting people in different meetings, in town halls, traveling around the country. We've seen videos of him up in the north, different areas, and he's engaging with people directly. So he's not afraid of people saying things, particularly. But overwhelmingly, the reception for His Excellency Peter Obi has been absolutely fantastic. The people love him because the people recognize him to be the change that we need in this country.
And, in the past, Peter Obi has been called a social media candidate, kind of like what you said. How, as a member of the Obedient Movement, how are you thinking about this characterization, especially in the context of what might happen in 2027? How are you guys using social media to position, what we might see in 2027?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that he's a social media candidate was well played in 2023. And we all saw what happens at the polls, right? We had over 6 million votes, at least that's what they counted for us. We believe we got a lot more than that. That goes to show that for a candidate who was in none of the two major parties to go ahead, come in third officially, right, and get over 6 million votes, it isn't a social media candidate. He is the candidate that speaks to the people, because Nigerians are desperate for something honest. They're desperate for something different, and fundamentally, that's what he brings to the table.
Interesting. Within the last few weeks or so, the federal government also shut down 13 million social media accounts in Nigeria for offensive content, violations of, the code of practice. I think it's also interesting to think about our social media habits as Nigerians, how Nigerians use social media, what we're talking about online, and how a lot of that actually is very offensive content, right?
I think social media is geared to anything that elicits an emotional response. And that is why all sorts of things blow up on social media, right? But the normal day-to-day interactions don't really make the news. And that's why it feels like there's a whole lot happening, or Twitter is full of critics. Most people are just expressing their opinions. People are sharing very relatable content, information, things that edify the soul and the body, right? But we tend to always focus on the negative. So I don't think Nigeria has any profound problem with social media. In fact, I think people deserve the right to be able to express themselves freely in a free country. If anything, it's the laws around the use of social media that I worry about, the use of some of these acts to basically have people arrested. And we've seen it in the Twitter space simply because they're checking power. They're asking fundamental questions about governance, about how the country is going. And people should have that right.
Mm-hmm. And something you said earlier I found really interesting is just how available, I guess, you kind of characterized Peter Obi as making himself to the public. How do you think leaders should be thinking about that going into 2027? Do you think that because he's made himself so available, we can expect other leaders to kind of follow suit and avail themselves more to the public, maybe be more active on social media, or what, how do you think he's kind of moved the needle in that way?
You see, Peter Obi is uniquely positioned to put himself in front of Nigerians, right? Simply because he's an honest man and he has integrity. When you have things to hide, you cannot go into the public space. You can't interact with people because it's an uncontrolled environment. People might ask questions around things that you've done in the past. Like the president can't have an open dialogue with people because we would ask him questions about what's happening in River State. We would challenge him. So a lot of politicians hide behind that, right? But Peter Obi can step into the public eye because he is a man of integrity. And fundamentally, that is what we need in Nigeria. Because let's face facts. No matter what you do in a corrupt system, corruption is like a mold. It will eat it up. There's the student loans, fantastic idea. Nobody can debate that, right? But look at what happened in the execution. Look how corruption has swallowed up the bulk of that money. Look what happened with the students' union and all of the whole mess. So no matter what policies you bring in, if you cannot eradicate corruption, you cannot do anything for the people. And Peter Obi is the only candidate, because of his personal integrity, who has the moral standing to hold the whole system to account, to change the political system for Nigerians.
What can we expect to hear either from the Obedient movement or Peter Obi? Everyone wants to know, what can we expect to see between now and 2027? Do you have any insight or?
I mean, I can tell you what we will see in 2027 after the election. It will be a well-drafted, a loving and uniting speech, thanking the Nigerian people for making him the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for being with us.